Earlier today, in Rome, in an overflowing crowd at St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis canonized two of the most important and probably most contested figures of the 20th century post-Vatican II Church, declaring Pope Paul VI and the martyred Archbishop of San Salvador, Oscar Romero, as models of saintliness for the faithful today. Pope Francis was greatly influenced by both men and had privately told confidants that he wanted them to make them saints during his papacy. The two represented the epitome of the outward-looking church that Francis has been championing, one that is close to the poor and one that fights for injustice. These two figures were canonized along with 5 others in a ceremony designed to show that holiness can be attained in all walks of life. Among the other 5 new saints is a young man who died at 19 from tuberculosis and is being presented as a model for young people. But it is Paul VI and Oscar Romero who endured strong opposition from within the church, both in life and in death, a fate that Francis is experiencing now as he continues to institute his reforms on church life. When at the beginning of the papacy, Francis talked about his vision of what he would like his papacy to be, he based it largely on a 1975 text by Paul VI on evangelization, a text that Francis has called the greatest pastoral document of the modern church. Needless to say, it was not a document that was very well received by many who currently oppose the Pope's reforms. Paul VI is perhaps best known for having presided over the final sessions of Vatican II, the 1962 to 1965 church meeting that modernized the Catholic Church and opened it up to the world, allowing the liturgy to be celebrated in the vernacular, like what we are doing now in English, rather than in Latin, and calling for greater roles for the laity and improved relations with people of other faith. Pope Paul set foot on each of the 5 continents, the first pope to do so. 2 of his trips stand out the most. In 1964, he traveled to the Holy Land, and he met with the spiritual leader of the world's Orthodox Christians, the first time a pope and the Patriarch of Constantinople had met in 1,000 years, since they excommunicated each other in 1054. A year later, he traveled to the United Nations, where he delivered his now famous plea for peace as the U.S. military involvement in Vietnam escalated. Never again war. Never again war, the Pope asked. But it was Paul VI's 1968 encyclical, Humanae Vitae, that marked his papacy, reaffirming the Church's opposition to artificial contraception. Issued in an era of the contraceptive pill, the 1960s sexual revolution, and alarm about overpopulation, the stark prohibition empowered conservatives but drove progressives away. And even today, the document remains one of the most controversial and ignored of papal encyclicals, which studies show that most Catholics disregard it and use artificial contraception. But Francis had also longed to declare Archbishop Oscar Romero a saint, convinced that he was a true martyr of the faith who willingly gave up his life to stand up with El Salvador's poor and denounce the violence of the military dictatorship. Romero was called the voice of those who did not have a voice. As I mentioned earlier, he was Archbishop of San Salvador. He was gunned down by a death squad as he was saying Mass on March 24, 1980, in a hospital chapel. He saw his assassins. The military had vehemently opposed his preaching against the army's repression at the start of that country's 1980 to 1992 civil war. Almost immediately after his death, Romero was co-opted as an icon of the South American left, with his image frequently appearing along the likes of Che Guevara. But the post-mortem politicized fame cost Romero dearly, as his saint-making cause wound its way around the Vatican. Some Latin American prelates feared that his perceived association with liberation theology would embolden the movement that holds that Jesus' teachings require followers to fight for social and economic justice. The late Archbishop found his legacy caught in those who would use it to advocate for their own political causes. It was not until a few months after Romero was beatified in 2015 that Francis denounced how Romero had suffered as a martyr twice. Once, he said, when he was gunned down, and again when his own brother bishops defamed, slandered, and had dirt thrown on his name. But Romero lived the way the rich young man in today's gospel could not. He gave it all up for the poor. It was a gradual conversion, yes, brought about by his experience as Archbishop of injustice and poverty among the people of San Salvador. There's a very famous prayer attributed to Oscar Romero. It was, however, composed by Bishop Ken Untner of Saginaw, Michigan in 1979 on the occasion of a Mass for deceased priests. It was written as a memorial for Oscar Romero. It reminds us that everything we do is in cooperation with God's grace. And I'll close with that. It helps now and then to step back and take the long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that can be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program by itself simply accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives can include everything. And this is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there's a sense of liberation in realizing that, because this enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders. We are ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future that is not our own.